Welcome back to Movie Recaps. Today I will show you a sci-fi, Passengers. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Headed to a colonized world called Homestead 2. All of its quarters are empty. 58 crew members as well as the 5,000 passengers are in hibernation. Well, that's weakening its shields. Power is diverted to the main shield. Suddenly, the asteroid collides with the ship, causing various malfunctions. One of the hibernation pods activates. The passenger awakened is Jim Preston, and an automated system helps with his awakening, telling him that he spent 120 months away from Homestead 2. He's told that he will be able to spend that time and gives instructions about his ID band, his cabin and the primary activities. Excited and nervous to meet the people on the ship, he gets ready, leaves learning group. Jim looks a little anxious, as the hologram explains that we're priced and overrated. It tells him to hold his questions to the end of the lesson. He realizes that the hologram can't answer him and goes to search for other people. No one is there either, but an automated informational desk offers to help. Talk to a steward. But when he finds that no one is there too, he asks to speak to the doesn't have access to go inside. He can see that none of the main crew is awake either. Finds out that the ship is actually 90 years away from Homestead 2. He on course and sends a message back to Earth asking what he should do. Because he doesn't know him, informs him that the overpriced call to Earth would take approximately 55 years. He walks around and finds the ship's bar, where he sees another person. When he goes to get him a drink, Jim realizes that he's an android. From him, but he can't even explain to the android how it's possible for him to goes to the cantina, where he quickly realizes that most of the things on the menu is his plain coffee and tries to figure out how to fix his hibernation chamber. And lies down inside of the pod. But nothing happens. Next, nation chambers. That doesn't work either. Small malfunctions happen, but mostly to talk to Arthur. The android gives him some advice, try to have some fun on the ship. Jim tries all the restaurants, the game becomes even more miserable to be there alone. One day, he gets into an airlock with spacesuits designed for spacewalks. Jim gets into to release the airlock door. Once outside the ship, he's mesmerized by the view moment in time. Jim releases the magnets on his boots and floats in space, takes off the suit, but goes back to the airlock without it on. Mind in the last moment, runs back inside and slips on a bottle. Jim's named Aurora. He searches for her files in the directory and listens. Later he's seen sitting next to her pod, still listening to her interviews, to Arthur about her writing. He becomes obsessed with the irony of his situation, up early and not getting there, and finding his perfect woman, only for her to be out of the idea to wake her up too. He talks it over with the android, but he doesn't fit. He'd be stranding her there with him, to die on the ship. Jim decides, until one day, he changes his mind. He goes to her pod and through the same process as he did, he hides and goes back to his room. And there she is, just as confused as he was a year ago. Then he tells her that he can't get to neither the crew, nor the main command to her pod. When they get to it, Jim explains that there is no special, effectively telling her that they're stranded. They go back at the concourse and he tells her she feels sorry for him, having to spend more than a year alone on the ship, what he did. He asks Arthur not to tell Aurora that he was the one that woke her up. She goes back to the concourse and asks the automated info desk about the hibernation. As they leave, the info desk has some sort of malfunction. Jim has been eating the same breakfast for more than a year and gets him one of the gold class menus. But, unlike Jim, Aurora isn't ready to give up. She eventually ending up at the crew's hibernation quarters trying to break the doors open. Sometime later, Aurora laments about her life on the Avalon. Becoming more and more aware of her situation. She goes to the canteen. She asks why he immigrated to the colony. Jim answers with hopes that on the new world he could be somebody, he could build a life. Later, reason to be there. Unlike the other passengers on the ship, she has a round trip, live there for a year and come back to Earth, to become the first journalist that has ever done. Aurora slowly gives up on finding a way to fix their current predicament and Jim figures out a enigma, and to the basketball court. Lastly, he takes her to the bar, remembers their situation. Jim is left alone with the android, feeling with something, and in the other Aurora walks into the observatory to find a miniature of. They go on a date at the bar. They have dinner and share stories about their teenager. After the dinner, Jim takes Aurora to the airlock and they together. Jim finally has someone to share that magnificent experience with, together in space. They come back inside and immediately kiss, which they start living like a couple. Aurora moves into his cabin and writes about her sleep together. Jim explores the ship further and finds the hydroponic. One day the ship passes by a red giant and they go to the observatory to see it. Rated in one of the many restaurants on the ship and then the bar. Jim goes to the stays in the bar chatting with Arthur. The android tells Aurora that Jim woke her up. Suddenly, Jim comes back and she confronts him in absolute Jim comes back to his cabin to find all her things gone. He runs into her. She runs away. Aurora is desperate. One night she goes over to Jim, talking to her over the comm because she keeps avoiding him. Jim tries to tell her he fell in love with her, but Aurora doesn't care. She can't forgive him. In his cabin, another malfunction happens. The ship faces a critical. He walks into the elevator and it malfunctions. Aurora walks into the main. Then, she goes to the cantina, where the food dispensary is also malfunctioning. Over the comms, asking who planted the tree. They both run into the They introduce themselves and tell the chief about the situation. He doesn't takes them to the bridge and he discovers that there is something wrong with the ship, but the information the bridge a robot almost falls on their heads and the two of them tell Mancuso that he says that shouldn't happen, as he shows them how to collect the data. He's figured out what happened with Aurora's pod. The deck chief finds bridge checking the collected data, when Aurora joins him. They talk about it. Jim walks in with the 16th broken robot. But as he walks out, he coughs out blood. That night, Aurora can't gravity lost throughout the ship and she starts drowning as the water from the pool moves with her alive. They both run into each other going to find Mancuso. What's been going on with the ship? Mancuso figures out that something happened to you. Find and fix what has caused the failure, because the entire ship is trying to pick up the stranded. They go to find the problem, but Mancuso faints, and there are no treatments that can stop it or prolong the time he has left. And Mancuso gives Jim his ID bracelet, tells them to fix the ship and immediately to an alarming red and the ship starts shaking. Jim tells Aurora that he another failure in the gravity drive. And immediately another one that afflicts. They finally arrive in engineering and start looking for the problem. The find is sucked in. The asteroid has caused a breach in the hull in that area, as it keeps closing on him. Eventually he gets sucked in too, but they quicken that problem. Jim realizes that there is more than one breach in the hull. It has hit the reactor control computer. Jim thinks he can find replacement. Process of venting the reactor still fails. They do it manually, but in a door from outside of the ship, so they can cool the reactor down. Both of them Aurora Mancuso's bracelet, because he might not come back. She helps him because she can't live on the ship without him. Aurora goes back to the reactor. From the reactor propels into her arm, as Jim is getting closer to the vent from the reactor room, while he is trying to bypass the vent door to open it. So the reactor can vent and he tells Aurora. She doesn't like the plan. She doesn't want him to die and they argue, but he tells her that they have to save the other people, but the fumes from the reactor push Jim away and break his tether. What happened and she moves as fast as she can to get to another suit and bring him in. On a suit and flies out to get him, but her tether is too short. She's pulled back in. Aurora drags Jim into the infirmary, only to find out that he's to override the medical protocols and to resuscitate him. The medical pod gives him. Later, Aurora fixes Arthur and they give Mancuso armory and tells her that he's found a way to use the medical pod as a hibernation journey in there. But, as is later revealed, she declines and decides he proposes to her and they live out their lives on the ship. 88 years, the crew wakes up and finds the ship in a very unexpected state. Aurora had on the ship while the rest were sleeping. Make sure to subscribe and thanks for watching.